If you have difficulty hearing or being heard when you're addressing the committee, then let me or the Democratic officer know. If you have a webcam, then try turning it off, as that will help with broadband or your Wi-Fi bandwidth, so you can at least hear and be heard. So thanks for coming, everyone. Good to see everyone. We'll start straight away with agenda item 1. So Amy said you've got some apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. It was actually just the one apology received from Councillor Gilligan. And just to confirm that we do have 3 of your co-opted members this evening, Rebecca Mateo, Dr. Price and Lucy Barraclough.
Great. I didn't have any apologies, so unless anyone else does. Good, we'll move on to agenda item 2. So the minutes from the last meeting on 6th of October. So it was the reconvened meeting and the ordinary meeting. Oh, sorry, Naomi, I saw your hand up there.
Yeah, Wendy Gilligan is unable to make it because she's in London, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. And
No
Rhiannon?
Thank you. I have to leave at 6:15 in order to go to another meeting, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. Elliot as well.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll have to leave about 6:30, if that's all right, for I've got another meeting.
Thanks, Elliot. And William Hennessy.
Yeah, same thing. I've got to leave at 6:30. I have another meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everyone. Yeah. So agenda item 2. So the minutes from the last meeting. So if I could just have a seconder for those. Russell Godfrey with his hand up. Thanks, Councillor Godfrey.
If I may, Chair, can I just confirm that you're moving and seconding both sets of the minutes, because we have 2 sets this evening?
Yeah. So both at the same time, if everyone's happy with that.
Is that okay for yourself, Councillor Godfrey?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. Item 3, any declarations of interest from anyone? No, great. So we'll move on to agenda item 4. So the draft capital strategy and initial capital programme proposals.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Victoria.
Just going to talk you through the report tonight. So the report provides the Council's draft capital strategy for 23-24 as Appendix 1, and also sets out the current 5-year capital programme for the period 23-24 to 27-28 as Appendix 2. The capital strategy looks at the longer-term view of the Council's capital investment requirements and outlines the various council strategies which identify priority areas for capital investment and the external factors that result in the need to incur capital expenditure. The available capital resources are difficult to predict over a long period, as the level of general capital funding provided by the Welsh Government is usually advised on a year-by-year basis, and the priority areas of spend which influence the provision of specific grants also change over a period of time. The capital receipts are also very difficult to predict given the uncertainty in the current economic climate. A summary of the 5-year capital programme and how it is funded is given in the report. The total value of the capital schemes over the next 5 years is anticipated to be £230 million. This includes £39.8 million for the Band B Sustainable Communities for Learning programme and £137 million for the Housing Investment programme. The funding table also highlights the borrowing required to implement the programme, which is £105.6 million, of which £76.4 million is in relation to the Housing Improvement programme. Capital bids were requested to be returned by the 9th of September, and in total 39 bids were submitted. Gross capital bids over the 5-year period total just under £110 million. The net bids, after deducting any potential grant and Section 106 funding available for the period, total £41.7 million. In relation to 23-24, the gross total of bids is £16.7 million and the net value is £14.5 million. If all the available funding is used as detailed in the report, the shortfall would be £2.5 million. And if the council borrowed to fund the shortfall, then the revenue cost associated with the borrowing would be 144k per annum over 40 years. This means that for every 1 million of borrowing, it would have an impact of circa 57k on the revenue budget. So the bids that were submitted and that are relevant to this committee are safeguarding and security of external school boundaries, the Yscol Sant Barrack internal adaptations, the St Richard Gwyn build, Cowbridge Phase 2, the health and safety priority items identified in condition surveys, and Sully Primary School. And there's more detail on those in Appendix 3. So as the settlement for 23-24 has not yet been confirmed, it's proposed that due to the uncertainty of the level of funding that will be provided, that no schemes will be approved for inclusion in the capital programme at this time, and that further assessment will be carried out by the Budget Working Group once the level of funding is known and the consultation has taken place. So the next steps are that the capital bids are going to be reviewed by Strategic Insight Board in November. And each scrutiny committee is being asked to consider the initial capital programme proposals at Appendix 2 and to make any recommendations for changes and to consider the capital bids that are shown in Appendix 3. If changes are requested or specific bids are supported, then the reasons need to be recorded in order to assist the Cabinet and the Budget Working Group in drawing up the final proposals. Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee will consider both the initial capital budget proposals and any recommendations that other scrutiny committees have made. The responses of the scrutiny committees must be referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee and made no later than the 16th of November 22. So the Council is currently working to balance the revenue budget for 23-24. It is very challenging due to the current economic climate and the cost of living crisis, and significant cost pressures have been submitted and they are currently being reviewed. The level of acceptable borrowing will be dependent on the resources that are available within revenue, which will not be known until January. So no further unsupported borrowing will be added to the capital programme until this time, and consideration will need to be made of the revenue costs and associated with the proposed borrowing. The timetable requires Cabinet to approve the final budget proposals in February, and that Cabinet's final capital programme proposals will be considered by Council early March to enable the Council tax to be set by the 11th of March 2023. That briefly summarises the report. I know it's quite a lengthy one, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. So if any councillors have any thoughts or questions, then raise your hand in the usual way. Councillor Payne, first off the blocks.
There we go. Thank you for that. For me, it was the question around what is unsupported borrowing in terms of the budget.
Yeah, okay. So every year we have a general capital funding settlement from Welsh Government, and that's made up of two elements. It's made up of a grant from Welsh Government, and then it's made up of supported borrowing from Welsh Government. And that the borrowing is supported because Welsh Government give us the money to pay for the borrowing, for the interest for the borrowing. But any unsupported borrowing, obviously we don't get the revenue budget to pay for that borrowing. We've got to find that internally and obviously make sure it's affordable.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
Thanks, Victoria.
No
Thanks,
problem.
Councillor Payne. Sorry. Any other questions? It's quite a lot to.
Yeah, it is a huge report.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm happy to take any questions after the meeting if anybody wants to drop me an email. But yeah, it's just, you know, to put forward any support for any of the bids as well that that have been submitted.
Councillor Franks has got a question.
Thank you. Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Franks, can I just check, because Councillor Franks isn't a member of the committee, are you happy for Councillor Franks to address?
I'm happy as long as everyone else is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's two gentle questions, Chair. I note the proposal to redevelop Richard Gwyn and also Sully Primary. I can't see in the report the location of the redevelopments. Can we have a bit more information along
regarding the new location of the schools, please.
Is Nathan Slater on the line? He is probably, oh, Paula's putting her hand up for that one.
Thank you. First of all, I would just like to point out that these are in the bid process. So these proposals haven't been worked up at the moment, although what I can say is that those are likely to be on the current sites of those schools. So there's not any alternative sites identified.
Okay. I think that Councillor Franks, if that answers your question, okay?
Yes, I'm grateful. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, there was a Cabinet report on St Richard Gwyn which talked about the proposal to move forward with it. The others are ones that are put in for discussion. They have no status and thus no location, no details.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I think it's a good idea, Victoria, but if anyone has any more questions to email you and get in touch, because it is a lot to digest, even for councillors, it's a lot to digest. So
No
thank you for
problem.
that. So in that case, I propose we note the 3 recommendations. If I could have a seconder for that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. So we move on then to agenda item 5, so the financial strategy 23-24 and the medium term financial plan refresh.
Yeah, so this is me as well. I'm sorry, it's another lengthy one. So this report sets out the financial strategy and the principles we'll follow in delivering the budget, and it refreshes our cost and funding assumptions over the medium term. So the council is operating in a really challenging environment and currently facing a gap of £28 million. We are continually reviewing our resources and funding levels, and we know that this figure will move over the coming months. There are spend pressures of 38 million that have been submitted, and the team have attempted to identify all known pressures to give us what is very likely to be a worst case scenario. The costs are categorised as investment, inflation, demographic and pressures for clarity, and we will be challenging these and in trying to balance the budget, assessing where they can't be taken forward or absorbed. The big unknown at this time is the funding settlement from Welsh Government. We've modelled on the indicative year 2 and 3 numbers from last year's settlement, so 3.5% for 23-24 and 2.4% for 24-25. In recent years, the financial settlement has been better than anticipated and the prospects for the council better than forecast. However, at this stage, it genuinely appears that that won't be the case for next financial year. Funding cuts are expected, and due to the current economic situation, and this has come at a time when the council really requires additional resources. We will review the pressures, but 21.7 million of these are inflationary and 2.4 million are due to increased numbers of older people and pupils having additional learning needs, so this will be really challenging to address. Scrutiny are being asked to review the strategy and the refreshed cost and funding assumptions in this report. Officers will review the cost pressures and bring forward savings proposals in November. A revised budget is being announced by the government in November, and the settlement from Welsh Government is expected late December. We will therefore bring forward a budget for consultation in January. We will continue to target resources to deliver the council's objectives, especially around care and support and hardship, and use our segregated schools cost pressures. So there's cost pressures in for demographic increase in mainstream schools, demographic increase in pupils requiring placement in the special school Ysgol-y-Derry, an autism special resource base at Whitmore High School, increased free school meals price, and an increased free school meals take-up cost pressure as well. And then turning to cost pressures for central learning and skills. So the cost pressures are secondary autism satellite provision, primary Welsh immersion unit, complex needs placements, the expansion of learning and wellbeing class horizon for pupils with anxiety, liaison engagement officers cost pressure, increased participation and support cost pressure, additional needs fund, a primary resource base for children with anxiety and autism, a reduction in out-of-county income, and then there's cost pressures in for the Sustainable Communities for Learning borrowing costs in relation to the capital bids for St Richard Gwyn, Sully and Cowbridge. And then there's also 2 transport cost pressures as well, one for ALN transport and one for school transport. Happy to take any questions, but again, appreciate it's a very complex report.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. So if anyone has any questions, Elliot Penn.
Thanks, Chair. In the report, it shows that the Audit Wales Financial Sustainability Report 21 shows excellent financial track records of the council. And I suppose through prudent finances, building up a good reserve, do you think that helps helps us more than some other councils maybe to weather some of the coming pressures, and there are some serious coming pressures, better than some other councils because of those reserves?
I think that the reserves, you know, are definitely going to help us, and like you say, it's really good that we've got these. There is in the report, it does highlight that there is going to be a review of reserves. The only thing to point out is that reserves are once only. Once we've used them, they've gone, and then they're gone. So we just need to be really mindful, you know, when we're using our reserves. But yes, you know, having a good level of reserves is going to help us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot. Any others? I've just got a quick one. This might be more of a political question, so I don't know if councillors Birch or Burnett might be able to help, but there's a bit in there about lobbying Welsh Government for an appropriate settlement. Obviously, certain councils have differing opinions on the funding formula, so I wonder if anyone, I see Councillor Burnett's got a hand up, would be able to shed some light on what that sort of form that lobbying would take.
Thank you, Chair. I think lobbying is probably an inaccurate word. I mean, going back right through the pandemic, local authority leaders and Welsh Government leaders have met on a regular basis. We currently meet fortnightly, and there is no stone unturned in terms of this. I think it's fair to say over recent years, if you review the data that comes out of the Local Government Association versus the data that's coming out of the Welsh Local Government Association, local authorities in Wales have been protected more than their colleagues in England. But we are not in a place where that will happen this year. Welsh Government gets its funds from the UK, and all the signals are that the Welsh Government settlement, which they don't know what it is yet, will be poor. That local government will be expected to make cuts as right across the board, and so we make our feelings heard. We have spoken as one through WLGA to lobby at a UK level and to lobby the new Secretary of State, but what we're hearing is not positive. So when we come to scrutiny, with the budget proposals, there will undoubtedly be very, very difficult choices to be made. When Vicky was talking about an awful lot of our cost pressures being inflationary, that basically means they've got to be funded. When we're talking about energy costs, when we're talking about people's wages, they've got to be funded. So we've got to find a way of doing that. So we will talk to anyone. We will have those conversations. I have frequent conversations. Unfortunately, I had to miss a meeting today on cost of living because we were in cabinet, but we are having meetings regularly and also discussions right across Wales. So I can tell you just as easily what the current situation is in Gwynedd as it is in Swansea, as it is in Ynys Môn. And actually, we're all in the same position in Wales. So we are all waiting for the 17th of November. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Burnett. So unless there's any other questions for Victoria or anyone else. Thanks for that update, Victoria. Again, very numbers heavy, so I'm sure everyone will enjoy digesting what that means. So I propose we note the recommendations. If I could have a seconder for that. Thank you. See Russell's hand. So moving on to agenda item 6, the update on the community benefits and sustainability outcomes of Band B. Can't remember who was taking charge of that one. Is it Nathan?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, it's me.
Hi, Nathan. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Yeah, so this is a update report on the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, which was previously known as the 21st Century programme. It's the development programme for new schools. So it's a grant programme from Welsh Government that's got an intervention rate that the council also part funds. At the moment, we're in Band B, and the Cabinet report seeks to update Cabinet and Scrutiny on the progress of the community benefits that have come forward as part of that programme. Community benefits are social value schemes which are linked to the individual projects that are within the programme. The programme started in January 2019, and the report gives an update from that date to August 2022. So in that time, within the Band B projects, just to give a brief overview of the high-level figures, the following has been delivered. So we've delivered over 12,500 person weeks of new entrant jobs. So that's 158 new full-time jobs. And then the new entrant jobs is basically how many weeks a person has worked out of those. Then in terms of new entrant training, there's 104 apprenticeships and 32 work experience placements. This works out to be over 7,000 person weeks. We've had over 3,000 hours of school STEM engagement, reaching out to over 11,000 pupils within the Vale of Glamorgan. So that's areas where the contractor teams have gone into schools, provided workshops, additional training to pupils, presentations, and engagement events. We've held over 26 supply chain engagement events. So these are held with the contractor and sometimes in collaboration with the council as well. This is to engage with local subcontractors and other people that are potentially supply materials within a project chain. And then on average, in terms of the projects during construction, we've avoided 99% from waste going to landfill. And then finally, on average, 82% of the construction spend has been within Wales, and then 85% of subcontractors are based within Wales, and then 50% of the workforce comes from the local postcode, and that's relevant to the location of the project. Just to summarise, the community benefit schemes relate to a series of targets. These are set by Welsh Government and also reflect the Welsh National TOMs which is basically a community benefit recording process that's linked to the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. These targets are set within the project contracts, so that's how they're delivered, and we hold the contractors to those contracts to ensure that those community benefits are delivered throughout the process. In terms of ongoing schemes, we have St Nicholas Primary School, that's now just starting its construction phase. We have Cowbridge Primary School, which is under construction. We have the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, which is known as New Oak, which is also under construction. Those have community benefits starting in earnest. They mainly come forward in the construction phases of those projects. However, we're also starting the process on the expansion of Ysgol Derry. That's in its professional services contract. So there is a contractor linked to that project, and they are bringing forward community benefits, but the scope is limited really until they can start construction on site. That basically is the summary of where we are and covers the key points within the report. I'm happy to take any questions. So yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. Let's see. Oh, Trevor.
I just wanted to point it out really quickly. If you're a visual person like I am, if you go onto the Vales website, it's still branded under 21st Century Schools. But if you type that into the search box, it brings up a dedicated page about the community benefits that we have from these projects. And what you'll find there, there's a number of case studies from the individual programs we've had in our schools, lots of pictures. There's lots of questions and answers and newsletters that we've produced over the years talking about some of those benefits. So I'd encourage anyone to go and have a look at some of those things and see it in practice, really.
Thank you, Trevor. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, Trevor, could you put a link to that in the chat?
No problem.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Thumbs up from Elliot. Very good. Is there any other questions from anyone? Okay, lovely. Short but oh, Councillor Burnett.
I just think that Trevor and Nathan have been hiding their light under a bushel on this one. I think it was far too short a summary in terms of the outcomes that have been delivered. This is actually groundbreaking work by the team. Well, groundbreaking and award-winning. The targets that are set by Welsh Government, our team have more than trebled them in the work that they've delivered. The way in which they've worked with our contractors is unprecedented within the industry. And whereas with most community benefits, quite often it's, oh, can you sponsor X or can you sponsor Y? The community benefits that have been delivered through this scheme use the skills and talents of our contractors to deliver for their communities. So that's why you have got new entrant training, why you've got, I mean, 158 new jobs, quite apart from, I think it's about 1,200 jobs per se, local jobs from the postcode. But in terms of new entrant jobs, people who haven't worked in the industry, the apprenticeships, the companies that are now UK-wide companies as a result of working with us and being supported to take on apprenticeships. Cast construction is one that's worth looking at. And also the amount of the construction spend that has been retained locally. I think a number of us have been at the Meet the Buyer events that have also been run in conjunction with these, and the children from a dairy ran Box Boyd, which was the canteen, which moved from site to site. So it provided work experience for the young people there. So please have a look at the information on the website. There's other information. Maybe you'd even want to some of the contractors to attend to talk about their experience, because, as I said, in a period of over 3 years or so, the outcomes that the team have delivered is absolutely phenomenal, and they deserve the highest praise that we can give. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Birch.
Good evening. Liz has said many of the things that I would like to have said, which is absolutely fine, because it was her portfolio under which, on her watch, most of this took place. But I would just like to point out, the kind of holistic approach to building and development that's taken place here. So it's not just about putting up a building, it's looking at all the opportunities that can create, the implications for all of the people involved in a project, whether they're laying roads or drawing plans. All of those things have been taken into consideration so that the impact is as wide-ranging as possible. And I would just like to offer praise and thanks to the officers for all of the work that they've done.
Great, thank you, Councillor Birch. I can't see any other hands. I just wanted to ask about the net zero targets, and I suppose everyone's satisfied that these works have met the net zero obligations and will continue to do so.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that, Trevor, if that's okay. Yeah, so in terms of decarbonisation, in January 2022, Welsh Government basically released a condition of the grant funding going forward, that any new schemes that had not had their outline business case approved, which is like a midway through a project, they would have to deliver to be net zero. And then year on year, we'd have to improve our embodied carbon target, which I believe started at 800, and then we're going down to 600, and then I think it goes down to 400 by 2023. In terms of the new schools, we were the first authority in Wales to deliver the net zero model, which was South Point Primary School. And we're building upon that model and rolling that out into those new schools that are being developed. As I mentioned, in Centre for Learning and Wellbeing, Cowbridge, St Nicholas, they will also be net zero schools, and they're all meeting the embodied target for 2022. Ysgol Derry, that project is improving upon that embodied target, so we'd actually be exceeding the one that we'd be required to meet. So we are quite confident. In terms of ensuring that we're meeting those net zero targets, when we develop the schools, we include monitoring information. So we have monitors within the school, and that reports monthly through a K2N network, which is hosted by Cardiff University, and we get monthly reports to identify where we're not meeting targets, and then we can contact the school, talk them through what they need to do in terms of like behaviour change, and to make sure that the materials being used are appropriate. And then we can build that into a lessons learned then going forward in the programme. I think that covers. I'm happy to answer any more questions on the net zero element, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, no, that answered my general question. Thank you for that, Nathan. I can't see if anyone else has got any questions.
Councillor Helen Payne has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, Helen.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo really what the leaders said, and Councillor Rhiannon Birch, and being involved as a school ambassador for Whitmore High in terms of the social capital involvement of young people in the build, in the construction, in what was done in the community. I just wanted to echo and congratulate you both on the work that was done. That's all really.
Thanks, Helen. Elliot Penn.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say about the proposed new Ysgol Derry site is when you look at the plans for the school and the sort of 21st century facilities they're going to have, and all the the rainwater harvesting, green roofs, all those things. Actually, it's absolutely brilliant. And I think the more schools that strive towards that in the future, the better.
Trevor?
I'm going to put another link in your chat, because we have a separate section as well, which is dedicated on the website to, just to pick up that point from Councillor Penn on ecology. So the ecology work that we do as part of this program, not just for some of those programs, but for community garden work that we've done. This is things like creating new ponds, rain gardens, reducing flood risks. We've got, wildflower areas, bird sanctuaries, all of these sorts of things. Some of which directly linked to the sites and the schools that are being done. Others with community groups. We've done some gardens at Palmerston Learning Centre, for example. There was some work done at Gwynedd. So there's lots of information on there around the ecology side of things, which is starting to build a lot of momentum in the work that we're doing in education and across the council as part of the Project Zero agenda. So I'll chuck that in there for you guys to have a look at as well.
Thanks, Trevor. Elliot mentioned Ysgol Derry, and obviously that'll be expanding. So I wondered if you had any thoughts on, the net zero and environmental impacts of a new site, and teachers and pupils having to travel. If things like that worked against the progress made with collecting rainwater and things like that, Trevor.
I'll let Nathan talk about some of the ecology side of things. There's a lot of work that's being done on the design for things like green roofs, photovoltaic cells, that kind of stuff. The YYD2 provision is an all Wales provision, so no matter where we put it, there is going to be travel from one corner or another for these pupils. What we are trying to do, and you would have seen a lot of that in sort of the cost pressures work that we're looking at doing, is reinforcing the support that we have in our mainstream schools with various resource bases to try and keep those kids in those schools as much as they can, rather than traveling where it isn't necessary. But I'll let Nathan talk about some of the more whizzy things that are happening on that specific site.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. In terms of the net zero elements within Ysgol Derry, we did consider travel arrangements into the location, and the application is supported by a transport assessment as well, in terms of focusing on how to reduce private car travel. There are certain restrictions with the type of school it is and the facilities that are required for the pupils. That does restrict certain things such as active travel provision. However, there's special stalls for modified bicycles to be provided on site. As Councillor Penn's picked up, there's a full green roof, which is a new provision for schools. So that's something that we've modified and looking to roll out into the future. And that's to help improve the sustainable urban drainage systems. So about harvesting that water, ensuring that it's not going straight onto hard surfaces and causing surface water flooding elsewhere. In terms of the net zero elements, it's a fabric first approach. So that's building upon passive house principles, ensuring that the insulation and ventilation in the building is monitored and maintained to ensure once you've heated it, it stays warm. And then there's ventilation aspects through natural ventilation to help manage the heat and temperature throughout the building. In terms of how we're heating it, it's from a series of air source heat pumps. And then, as Trevor mentioned, there's a full suite of photovoltaic solar panels on the building to help with energy efficiency. And during the summer months, there's also battery storage within the site as well to help through where there's lower peaks in solar energy to help maintain that building and its energy efficiency.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nathan. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question about the redevelopment of the St Nicholas School. Used to be in my ward, obviously with the boundary changes it changed, but I'm pretty sure I remember that there was a bit of an objection to redeveloping a school on the existing site because of the issue with the narrow roads and the parking. And I understand that they're now going to go ahead and redevelop on the site when there was another site being looked at. Is there any update on any reason why that was done?
Yeah, I could pick up on that one as well, Councillor Godfrey. In terms of St Nicholas, we did do a review of alternative sites. However, in terms of purchasing land and the implications it would have had, they would have all been located outside the settlement boundary of St Nicholas. So there's planning considerations to be taken there. In terms of the narrow roads and accessing the site, we have considered that within the design, and we've moved a lot of the we've moved the drop-off and pick-up area into the site, as well as all staff parking being accommodated on the site. At the moment, in the existing school, I believe there's only 12 to 15 car parking spaces, so you do get some leakage of staff parking within the village, which causes issues. However, we've addressed that on the newly designed scheme. We did a wide-ranging search within the catchment area of the existing school in terms of areas of land which could be appropriate. So that was done at a high level and based on, I believe, a 1.2 hectare site size. As we moved away from the existing settlements, so St Nicholas and Bombleston, you then start going into the open countryside. Because it's a rural school location, you would then be limited in terms of how to develop other sites there. So we did consider other options, but in terms of the constraints, it was considered on balance that the existing site had the least constraints and was more acceptable in planning terms.
Thank you for that, Nathan. That's a great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nathan, for that. And if there's no other questions, thank you for that, Nathan. Really interesting and useful, and Trevor as well for your contributions. So for that one, I'll propose we note the full recommendations. If I could have a seconder for that. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7, so report from the Director of Learning and Skills. So capital monitoring for the period 1st of April to 30th of September.
Sorry, Chair, just before you bring Vicky back in there, could I just check who the seconder was? I was minuting, so I missed. I didn't hear
I had a
anything.
few hands. I saw Councillor Marshalsea first of all.
Okay, I'll take Marshalsea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the capital monitoring for the 1st of April to the 30th of September, so the report gives an update of the progress of the capital programme over that period. And at the time of writing, the approved programme totalled 95.1 million. But when taking into account the requests within the report to amend the capital programme, the revised forecast outturn projection is 92.6 million. Spend to the end of September for the whole programme is 18.4 million. So the capital programme is still subject to significant inflationary pressures due to the current economic climate, and it's leading to more negotiations with contractors, re-tendering processes and project re-engineering. And there are still issues as well with long lead times in the delivery of materials, and it is resulting in some delays. So schemes are being closely monitored to identify any overspends and slippages, and as part of this report, slippage of 2.5 million had been requested. It is anticipated that there will be further slippage later in the financial year, and that will be brought in due course as they occur. So Appendix 1 details the financial progress on the capital programme by scheme, and Appendix 2 is summarised over the directorates, and that sets out the approved budget as at the final proposals, and then it details the movements in year, including slippages and additions to demonstrate the journey to the revised forecast outturn for 22-23. The report also details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers, which are detailed in Appendix 1 in the comments. The report requests to make some amendments to the current capital programme, and the request relevant to this scrutiny committee is the carry forward of 56k into the 23-24 capital programme in relation to the Ysgol Sant Curig lighting renewal scheme. This is due to the extent of work required that it can only be taken during the school holidays, and the work is now programmed for summer 2023. So I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Thanks, Victoria. So if anyone has any thoughts or comments. It's another one of those financial ones, Victoria. I think everyone's a little bit fried by that one, which is understandable, but thank you for
Yeah,
your
no problem. As I said, I'm happy, you know, for people to email me with any questions. That's
Yeah.
no problem.
No, brilliant. I think that's great. So I'll propose that we note the recommendations. So if I could have a seconder for that. Hennessy, thank you very much. I think it's Caris next. The summary of the Eston inspections.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Chair. You've got a copy as part of your papers of the summary of inspection outcomes for summer term 2022. If you recall, because of COVID, Eston inspections were suspended back in March 2020. They were reintroduced back in spring this year, and so we considered the findings of the spring term reports back in July. So this is the outcome of the summer term reports, and you'll see that there's reference here to 4 schools that were inspected back in the summer term. So that's Ysgol y Ddraig, Peterson Superiri Church in Wales Primary, Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg and Sully Primary. So in terms of the inspection process, they were inspected using the revised inspection arrangements, which were piloted during the spring and summer term. And for the summer term, Eston chose the schools that was to be inspected. That's slightly different to the spring term. In the spring term, if you recall, schools put themselves forward for inspection. But in the summer term this year, it was Eston that identified the schools. So as I mentioned, 4 schools have been inspected, and as part of Appendix 1 of your papers, you'll see a link to the inspection report. You'll also have an overview of the recommendations and information about follow-up category. In terms of the actual report, you will see, if you have a look at the reports, that there's reference to 5 inspection areas. The first of all being learning, then well-being and attitudes to learning, teaching and learning experiences, care support and guidance, and leadership and management. You'll find that there isn't a summative judgment anymore in terms of the inspections and the reports, but what you will find is detailed information in terms of strengths and areas for development within each inspection area. With each inspection as well, there's consideration whether the school needs any follow-up activity, and if there is any follow-up activity, the type of follow-up category. And you've got 3 categories: Eston review, significant improvement, or special measures. And in terms of the 4 schools that were inspected in the summer term, there's no follow-up work involved in any of those schools. Eston also, when they come across any interesting or innovative practice, will invite schools to write a case study to publish and to celebrate their work. For your information, there's been no case studies invited in terms of the 4 schools that were inspected in the summer term. So what I've also included in terms of Appendix 2 of the paper, you will see, going back to a list of schools and one sort of non-maintained setting. Those are the schools that have been inspected now since the introduction of a revised common inspection framework back in spring 22. So that's something we'll keep updating and we'll come back to on a termly basis. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any in relation to the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Caris. So yes, any questions or thoughts, councillors? Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested if there are any areas that are highlighted as being exceptional in the Ested reports, whether we could actually hear some feedback on the committee, please. I think that would be really constructive and interesting for us. Thank you.
Can I respond to that, Chair?
Please.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. That's certainly something I had in mind as well. So it's something we have done in the past, where there have been case studies of, sort of good practice or interesting and innovative practice. We've presented them, as a paper to begin with, collating all of them together, and then asking the schools themselves to present and give a flavour of their practice to members. So that's something we will certainly give consideration to moving forward. So thank you very much for that suggestion. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Something we can talk about with Amy, and I'm sure we'll come to some arrangement there. So thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Payne.
Thank you. Hi, Carys. I just wondered, in terms of staffing and the change from the Common Inspection Framework to the new framework, how was it for staff? Did it make a difference to them? Just interested in their perspective, really.
A few feedback has come through in terms of discussions with schools that have been inspected. There's obviously less time now for schools between the notification period and the actual inspection, which some have commented they found useful, because in a, it is a very pressurised 10 working days, don't get me wrong, but they appreciate that in a sense that there is less notification. So that's something they've appreciated. And several have also commented that they find, because a summative judgment is no longer given in terms of the inspection areas, that they appreciate that there's more evaluation and more feedback in terms of the strengths and areas for development. So that's something that they have appreciated as well. And because it has been a pilot framework, they've also appreciated that Estyn have, discussed with them and have, sort of involved the schools in providing feedback to the inspection framework. So they do feel that they, sort of they have an input and they have had a voice as part of the process as well. So certainly those are key strengths that are coming through the new pilot framework that has been inspected.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Payne. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. As you probably know, I'm a retired teacher. I've been through several inspections myself. I will say that I think the truncated notice period is probably good. I've been in schools where we were given almost a term in order to prepare, and it just meant that you were having performance anxiety for that entire term. But even though there's no summative assessment on this, I would like you, Carys, to be passing on our congratulations to all of those schools for for coming out with the results that they did. And I'm pleased that from what you're saying, it sounds more of a supportive process than it has been in the past. Obviously, people still feel really apprehensive and concerned about the entire process, but it does sound as if it's more collaborative and supportive than previous inspection regimes. So I would like you to pass on our congratulations to these schools, please.
I will, Councillor Birch. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Marshalsea.
Yeah, I think similar to Rhiannon, I've been a teacher and a leader in a school where we were actually told overnight we had the inspectors in the next day, and actually I preferred it. I think it's more of an honest judgment. I think the less time is probably easier for all staff involved, because you have to do what you are going to ordinarily do, and much easier for staff. I think, the long wait of a term is never helpful to anyone. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Rhiannon said, really. Big congratulations to the schools. They're clearly working incredibly hard in a difficult time as well.
Thanks, Naomi. Councillor Godfrey.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Yeah.
Firstly, I'd like to echo what Councillor Marshall has just said. I think she's absolutely spot on. Having been a school governor myself previously and seen the stress and anxiety teachers go through over a long period of time when they've got so much notification. But I also think it needs to be fair to be said, and to ask Carys to pass on the congratulations to all of our teaching staff, because I think this result couldn't have been achieved if we didn't have the calibre of teacher we've obviously got within the Vale. I think that, you know, plays a key part in it. You've got to have people of calibre to be able to be as successful as we've been. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Caris, for the update. And I think obviously you can speak for everyone saying that it's great that these schools have done so well, and the children will be the ones who benefit. So that's a brilliant thing. So thank you for the update, and I know everyone shares that sentiment. So if I could get a seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Hennessy, thank you very much. So thank you again, Caris, for that. And then the final agenda item, number 9, is the youth engagement and progression update.
Hi, Chair. I think that's myself and Rhys Jones. Rhys should be on the call.
There we go. Hi, both.
Hi, Chair. I'm going to start us off, Rhys, and I'll come in.
Sorry, yeah. So the report is there obviously for all to see in the progression of the needs progression framework. As all are aware, we've got a mandate to report on the destination data on an annual basis. If we go through some of the executive summary itself, our NEETs figures this year are looking very positive. We have got a little a slight raise in the year 11, but it's still below the Welsh average at 1.6%, and we're coming out at 1% this year. The year 12 young people classified as NEET is only at 0.4, so we're on par with our counterparts and on average as to the Welsh average. And young people leaving NEET in year 13 unfortunately has risen. And obviously a lot of this is to do with the COVID pandemic and people changing their destination then, I would say. On par, I think we're doing well for our NEETs figures across the board. Compared to our regional partners, they've seen a big shift in this area of work and the field of NEETs. We've seen a large push of young people go in and come in, I guess, from the post-COVID pandemic, have decided not to stay in education, employment and training, have kind of gone towards the employment market and the employment field because they've had 2 years of this on and off online learning and they haven't found that successful. So a lot of young people have found that they haven't stayed on in sixth form and college and gone to higher education. We've already seen a shift in destination data this year. I know obviously we're reporting on last year's final destination data that's been reported from Welsh Government in April, but this year we're already seeing a shift in those that are coming out with high anxiety and a bigger shift to those in tier 2 which are not ready for education implement or training. The report itself talks about some of the key work we've done from Inspire to Achieve, which is the pre-16 NEET programme that we operate in schools. The post-16 NEET programme then Inspire to Work. It's good to note that all of those programs for ESF are now due to end on the 31st of December this year. That will obviously have an impact on some of our NEET figures going forward. We are trying to work with C4W Plus, the Youth Guarantee Programme lead, to try and keep these figures down. And obviously we've also implemented new strategies around destination data, supporting GCSEs, A-level results days, this sort of work with schools so that we can try and keep this figure low. But we are kind of optimistic at the moment and still waiting on guidance whether we will get any shared prosperity funding and these sort of are like really as a replacement to ESF. So we, you know, positive is that we're looking good and this year's figures are also looking positive, but there will be a shift in the work that we're able to achieve from January next year in the line of C4W Plus Youth Guarantee. So, you know, it'll be a key consideration, I guess, for next year as to where this data is looking and how positive it remains, really.
I think it's important to come in there and just reiterate really that the Inspire to Achieve I2A and Inspire to Work I2W programs that have been funded, as Rhys has said, via the European Social Fund have to end now in December because obviously we can't draw down any European Social Fund monies any further because of the political situation and the UK exiting the EU. And these two projects have been incredibly successful. The data in the appendix or at the end of the report highlights in particular how successful I2W and effective I2W has been in addressing the issue of limiting the number of NEETs. And there are, as is the case when any change occurs, there is going to be a period of turbulence here whereby things stabilise again. Our focus within the youth service will be, as Rhys has outlined, sort of our pre-16 NEETs, and there will be a greater emphasis on C4W communities for work to address the post-16 NEETs agenda. Quite clearly, we've drawn down significant resources to be able to fund these two projects, and the way that Shared Prosperity Fund manifests itself over time now will be key as to how much of this legacy work from I2A, I2W can be further sustained. But this is a potentially challenging time for us now against what's been outlined earlier on as a potentially future quite gloomy financial outlook. So we can see there are some challenges ahead here in sustaining this high level of output we've been able to achieve in terms of the NEETs agenda. And it's only fair to be open and transparent about that, I think.
Great, thanks,
Sorry,
Martin
Rhys,
and Rhys, for the update. So the councillors now, have we got any questions for Martin and Rhys? Councillor Payne.
Hi, thank you both. I'm just interested in you identifying young people as NEET. Do they know they've been identified as NEET? Have they any idea that they're being targeted?
Yeah, so all schools complete the VAP data assessment pro kit in schools. They identified those who are most likely at risk to become NEET then post-16 due to a range of factors. The factors are similar and are based on framework that is operated across all PAM Wales. Really, the 22 local authorities follow the same sort of scoring process. We identify those then at red, and then we discuss them with the schools and young person as to what support we may be able to offer if they're at risk of being excluded or those higher risk factors, really. From there, we've also got additional weighting. So quite often, obviously, that data is only ran twice a year. So quite often somebody may have a bereavement, or there may be an issue that's come to light all of a sudden. So we've also got an additional system in SIMS where we're able to add additionality and weighting onto that, so we can actually put support in immediately to support these learners. They will generally be finding it difficult in schools. The attendance will be reducing. We only work with those that are on 80% and above attendance, whereas obviously below 80, we've got the LEO officers and we've got inclusion support then to offer that support. So we generally work in the schools 80 to 100% attendance. We're trying to highlight those young people that potentially there's a conflict in a lesson, or there's one lesson where there's a clinch point, and trying to support that learner then by running BTEC or Agoric Cymru unit so that they're getting accredited learning from us then, and kind of negating away from that young learner then being excluded for the day or the afternoon, and trying to reduce that as much as possible. But it's clear from day one, parents have to sign consent that they're working on this programme, the reasons for, and obviously prevention of NEET, and then we follow them through then year 10 and 11. Hopefully we will have come out then with their BTEC qualification, level 1 and level 2, and as a consequence of that then we'll keep in touch over the summer, as I mentioned, GCSE results day then, pushing them then to concern, have you got your destination data? Do we need extra support? Can we help you any further? So from day one, really, that parents have to sign up to this along with the young people.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in the young person's perspective. So is there any stigma involved with being on the programme? Or are the young people aware of the programme?
Yeah, it's seen as a support mechanism within the school. So we've got quite a number of young people pre and post 16 obviously involved in the programme. They all see it as positive. They're seeing it as a support mechanism for them keeping in school, going to school and not being excluded and sent home on those days. Each young learner has an individual action plan that they work towards. So it's not that we go into a school and work with 6 on bullying, for example. It's an individual process where then Newport currently have been assessing each one of those folders for the quality assurance then to ensure we've been working well with that young person, and we're getting the outcomes that are required then to ensure reduced risk and NEET going further post 16.
Okay, and just another one is, what if they won't engage? What's the issue? You know, how do you go about that?
Generally just pushing as youth workers, trying to build that positive relationship. Obviously we support in after school clubs and also in the youth club in those areas, so the idea is that that relationship is built in different ways, and then we can try and support in the school. If obviously it doesn't work, it may not work, then we also then will support with, you know, does a Leo officer have to become involved? Maybe we can push to the youth wellbeing service, maybe we go to our youth homelessness team, and we work collaboratively then with the service to see how can we get that support in place. Because I think, as you know, as you heard earlier, really, if that's not working and there's the progression and exclusions increase, you know, generally then it'll come up under the exclusions panel, and we'll be having to support in that way anyway before it comes to SEMP. So there's a multitude of intervention and support early doors, really.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
we'd
thanks
rather
very
build
much.
relationships, Councillor Payne, and approach it in a positive manner if a young person has a degree of resistance than try and sort of coerce them into it, because the feeling is generally if they don't see the engagement for the intrinsic value that it exhibits, it becomes very oppositional then. Usually, as Reece says, due to the myriad of different approaches and ways we try and engage with young people, often, you know,
Yeah.
they're happy enough to engage. They can see that we're trying to help.
Okay, and my just one last thing is the percentage of boys and girls, or young men and young women. Is there a split?
There is a split, that's in the appendices 1 and 2. You've got the breakdown then of males and females. I think we're slightly behind on the females we were supposed to engage with,
Yeah.
but I think for the programme we're doing well. So I think we're slightly behind, but I think in other areas we're picking it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Thanks very much.
I know you mentioned earlier then about obviously as pupil engagement, also we're supporting lit schools with their alternative curriculum brochure as well.
Yeah.
That's part of my role. So what we also have got within some of the schools, if it's not working on some of these levels, we've also got Cardiff City Kicks programme that's in the schools doing daytime provision. We've also got Empire Fighting Chance supporting the schools with those learners needing additional support. Plus then we've got the additional provisions such as Grow, etc., that, you know, some of those learners need a bit more bespoke support. Another one is Mal down at Jojo. So we've got other opportunities. If it's not quite working with us and the team, the schools are being supported then to put in alternative education provision themselves. And like I said, we've got some provision in the schools as well. I know for Pencoitre, for example, we've got a good relationship with the rugby club there, and we've supported funding for the youth club there alongside then the worker who works in the school doing the School of Hard Knocks, for example. So there's a mixture and myriad of support services that we're offering alongside the Inspired as prevention.
Yep, they're third sector organisations, though, aren't they? They're not local authority.
No, all third sector, obviously, because it's grant funded, it's mixture.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Helen. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I am quite interested in the provision for children that aren't at school, so education otherwise, home education, children that don't fall under the umbrella, like you say, the youth club and that. Is there provision for children who are being home educated or have fallen out of school?
Yeah, Martin, did you want to come in from an inclusion point perspective?
We've started to set up like a drop in on a weekly basis based on the YMCA hub, where young people can access support from those backgrounds. Reece is sort of wrapped up, isn't it, with the youth service offer as well, because often the young people are sort of used to going there to access youth services. So
and I
don't know
think
if you want to
it's
speak to that, Reece.
No, I think it's different. Obviously, if they're elective home ed, that is different. You know, it's parents are entitled, and then obviously we've got a support mechanism through Mark Wazocki and his team then who can offer that support to those who decide to go elective home ed. For those then, I guess for, you know, EOTAS or what you'd class that as, we don't have an EOTAS role in the Vale, so all learners still have to remain on a school role, and it's us supporting the schools then with their alt ed brochure and their packages of support for these learners. It then obviously comes to us as a local authority once those learners aren't able to sustain a full-time in those mainstream schools. And this is where then we may be involved with more bespoke offers, maybe ACT, for example, or those that are then based out of county with independent schools. So we've got a quality assurance framework that we're based on that. And also then I also put on annual Sell to Wales sort of promotion as to the services and needs of the learners in the Vale. So that changes year on year from the amount of classes or support we'll buy into and to support those learners really.
That's brilliant. I was just wondering how people did find out about it, whether you were advertising in other kind of ways, or whether it was just through the systems, through the people that are in place, like Mark.
Generally, elective home ed is obviously different. As soon as we're made aware that a school, a parent has signed that they're willing to go elective home ed, that gets passed across to Kiva's team, and Mark Wazocki then will pick them up immediately then, because we have to evidence that they've got a package of education that they're going to receive at home. For us then, if they're coming through support panels such as then SEMP, which Martin and Morwin then lead on, it'll be a range of support services before we even get to then considering the wider reach of support for those learners, and whether we agree on packages, and especially if it's going to be coming to more bespoke offers in independent schools and out of county, there's a much wider discussion then in regards to the cost of that, and why are we unable to meet their needs locally in any of our resource bases and provision that we've mentioned earlier on today.
So
That's
Reece,
brilliant.
correct to say that with elective home education, those young people obviously would be educated predominantly by the parents. We're just mindful of the fact that we want to maintain contact and support families as far as we possibly can within that context. So the drop-ins have been created, and also there's as I said previously, really, with when I've updated Scrutiny in terms of the HE, there's a small amount of grant money from Welsh Government which we look to try and support families with. In terms of anything around the EOTUS agenda, as was, all of that provision would usually be implemented via SEMP, as Reece has outlined. So that's a social and emotional mental health panel, and a variety of professionals sit on there. Schools refer in directly with consent from parents, and then we determine whether we would look to implement specialist provision or support, sometimes to sustain young people within the mainstream setting, but also then we consider specialist placement if that's appropriate as well.
Thank you very much. That's really brilliant. That's great work you're doing to support children. Thank you.
Problem.
Thanks, Emma. I see Councillor Johnson.
If I'm allowed permission to speak to the committee chair, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to draw committee's attention to Appendix B, which is the Inspire to Work elements, and you notice that the Vale of Glamorgan has outperformed all of the other joint beneficiaries within the East Wales area. Martin and Reece will know that I have some knowledge of this from wearing a different hat outside of the council chamber. But my question really is relating to that. Obviously, there's been a relationship with Llamau that's been part of this with Inspire to Work in the East Wales area. Given the programme drawing to an end at the end of next month, I'm just wondering sort of how you feel that has or hasn't worked, sort of in this programme, and sort of what lessons can be learned as we go forward. Because obviously, Llamau have been dealing with some of the clients at the euphemistically harder to reach elements, and we've been dealing with some of those who are maybe close to the job market. So I'd just be interested in how you feel that relationship has worked, and what our aims are for the future. Thank you.
If I jump in there, relationship was amazing. I've got to be honest, ourselves and Llanmai quite often would discuss cases. I think you've pointed it out well there. They generally work with those that are on tier 2, that are harder to reach and get into the education, employment and training market. The difficulty for Llanmai is they had a range of different programs. They got 2 or 3 which were all European funding, and quite often they had conflicts of those funding and where they stuck the learner. So quite often we would make a referral to the program, but they would stick them on another program because that suited the learner better. So it's more of a Llanmai concern there, and I know their figures were dropping slightly. The difficulty is they had similar figures to ourselves, and for those learners that need a year of support or 2 years of support, whereas we were supporting learners quite quickly and getting them into education employment within 3 to 6 months, they were taking a lot longer. So to us, obviously the relationship was good. We allowed that to carry on. Obviously our figures and theirs were combined as a regional operation anyway with the finances, so we were aware of that, and they attended all our quarterly health checks and monitoring meetings with Newport. Going forward, they will have access to all the European money and everything else that's come through as post-16. Training providers and those currently are all having additional money as post to COVID. So they're trying to reach out to learners at the moment, because we know there's a spike in those that are not quite ready for education, implement or training. For us, obviously, you can see in the report C4W and C4W Plus itself, they've had a 100% rise in their finances. Plus, we've also brought in the Youth Guarantee, which also sits under that team. So for us, it's that shift of post-16 employability, I guess, which now will be led by, that will come under Mark Davis and his teams, with Colin Davis, etc. So, it'll be about us closely working with those at the EPF board now to consider what implications there are going forward, which young people are coming through with NEET. Our relationship is great with careers, so we meet on a bi-weekly basis. We discuss all learners in tier 1, 2 and 3, so we're aware then of those learners that are already engaged with careers and are kind of dropping off, and it's those that we're trying to push then towards learning for life programs with Llamai and others, which there's more support in place for those learners, because if we're being honest, a lot of those training providers are offering, here it is, come along, we'll pay you £50 to attend a week, but the support isn't there in the background, and these learners need that hand holding, and I'm hoping that's where the Youth Guarantee money will come in, because that money is quite driven as well in that area. So there'll be a little bit of joint work. I know I'm meeting up with the team this week itself, so put processes in that field will move, and I know we've already met with YOS to consider their implications for their post-16 and those potentially having a 16-hour offer as part of the Youth Justice Board stats. So there is progress. It's just we know it's going to be a turbulent 6 to 8 months really, as that all kind of intertwines. Plus we don't know still if shared prosperity could come, that finance could come, which also will implement and change things again. So it's interesting times, and hopefully it's going to work positive.
I mean, thanks so much for that, Rhys. And I think my concern is to make sure that that this committee and the council generally covers not just the work that the council is doing, but all of the work that gets covered under this umbrella, within the county as well, so that we don't miss sections, areas, groups of people out of the these discussions. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I can't see anyone else with a question or a thought. I just want to say thank you to Martin and Rhys for coming and talking to us. Really important work you do and really valuable. So thank you for the update. And if I could have a seconder to note the recommendations, which includes getting another update from Rhys and Martin in 12 months' time. So thank you, Naomi, for that. So that was the last agenda item. So I want to thank you, everyone, for attending and contributing. We'll have another one in December, sometime for the Christmas break. So I just want to say thank you for participating, and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Night all.
Good night.